We are Panel by Panel Discussion, Cleveland State's official comic book club.
We'll need a good filter. All right. Welcome to Panel by Panel Discussion. Today we are talking about Superman, all about Superman. And Matt, if you would be ever so kind as to start us off.
Good afternoon. How's everyone?
Good.
Harvey here. His name is here. You know, there's a lot of good journalists in the world. You know, like Woodward and Bernstein, you know, Max and Giacomo, he's pretty cool. Clark Kent, Lois Lane. I'm going to talk about another reporter, if you don't mind, and that's Theodore Herzl. Yes. Theodore Herzl once said in the State of Israel, if you will it is no dream. What does that do to Superman? A lot. You see, Superman's creators, they made Superman happen. How did all this begin? Well, it happened in a very unusual way, but nevertheless, it happened. It didn't happen in that little town in Illinois, in Metropolis. It didn't happen in Smallville. It actually happened in here. Not this building, but Cleveland. And the thing was about Superman that really touched base, I think, it just hit off with everybody, is the fact that they had a character that was just original. You see, because of Superman, all the names you talked about earlier, all of them now exist. Batman, Deadpool, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, Captain America, all of them, they now exist because of the work and the genius of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. To understand the myth of Superman and where Superman's humble beginnings are, you actually have to go to a place not far from here in Glenville, 10622 Kimberly, where in that house, Jerry was he was raised, and not far from where Jerry was lived was Joe Shuster. And who were Jerry and Joe? So let me tell you who Jerry and Joe were, for those who don't know. There were these two Clark Kents, literally, two shy guys, Clark Kents as it were, literally, who had an idea for a comic strip and nobody wanted it. Nobody. Jerry was the youngest. He was born on October 17th, 1914. Joe Shuster was born on July 10th, 1914. Joe was born actually in Canada, Toronto, Canada. Jerry was born here in the good old US of A. And they had met courtesy of, now they both loved science fiction, but how they met is very interesting because back in those days when you went to school, you had to go to the school that was closest to your house. Well, Joe's tenement house was closer to Glenville High School. And Joe actually knew Jerry Fine. Now, who's Jerry Fine? Jerry Fine is Jerry Siegel's cousin. And he says, listen, if you go to Glenville, check out this guy named Jerry Siegel. He's my cousin. He's into the same things you are, science fiction. He's into fantasy stories, that kind of stuff. Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon. Heck of a guy. Meet him. And they set each other up. They met, and they got to know one another, and they became friends like that. And it was a friendship that literally lasted a lifetime. Whatever, because Joe loved to draw and Jerry loved to write, whatever Joe would draw and Jerry would write, they would do it. And that was pretty much, so one did one thing and then one did the other, and it was formidable, whatever they did. They came up with these ideas. Both did not have money. They didn't come from money. This was the Depression. So if you didn't have money, you didn't have it. Yet you went to that greener grass. Where was that job at? There was no 24-hour restaurants. There was no internet. There was none of that stuff. It was nothing. And it was just a very dark time in American history. But they listened to Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his fireside chats on the radio, and like the rest of America, they were moved by his words that inspired everyone. And they were inspired to create their own science fiction magazine. And it was called Science Fiction. This is back when they were still in high school, for God's sakes. And they came up with this stuff. And they said, these different stories. So whatever they did, they put it on paper, and people bought it. People actually ate it up. But there was an incident that happened a couple years before that that really affected Jerry. Comic books and comic book magazines and that kind of stuff, comic strips, in the newspapers, comic strips were not just one page, they were 10 pages. And also, even though it was the Depression, comic strip creators, writers and artists, were millionaires. Literally. Does anyone know the name of Chester Gould? Anyone? Beside you, Mark. Does anyone know the name of Alex Raymond? Beside you, Mark. How about anybody? No? Okay. Well, Alex Raymond created Flash Gordon. Chester Gould created Dick Tracy. Don't forget, you also had the Lone Ranger, the Green Hornet, Little Orphan Annie, Mickey Mouse. And all of those people came from comic strips. Now, you had radio dramas, you had movie serials, some of them had animation, you had merchandising, and if your comic strip appears in 10,000 newspapers across the country, that's a lot of money in your pocket. And people were making it, I mean, they were eating it up and they loved it. They couldn't, the adventures of Little Orphan Annie and Buck Rogers, and people loved it. And Jerry and Joe were like, well, why can't we do that, So what they tried to do was try to create something that was original. And when Jerry's father, Michael, looks like it's spelled Mitchell, but it's Michael, he owned a haberdashery shop, and he believed in Jerry. He really believed in Jerry, and out of the literally 6 kids of the Siegels, and you had Isidore, Miranda, Rosalind, Harry, Leo. Leo was a dentist, if anyone doesn't know. And then, of course, you had the youngest, Jerry. And Jerry was told by his father, yes, believe in this stuff, go do it, great. But 3 men, or a couple men, or how the story goes, came in there. One story goes he was shot. One story goes that he got a heart attack. Actually, the story is he got a heart attack, unfortunately. And he died. And so, of course, the family is now stuck in this place of struggle. They got to find a way to get a job and make it. And everybody, like I said, everybody in the family did something. Sarah Siegel, Jerry's mother, she was the house mother. She basically cleaned the house, took care of things, and where everybody else worked. Everybody else did what they could to put food on the table. And they did this, and they tried to make ends meet as best they could. And Joe's family, which came from Toronto, Canada, Joe came here when he was 10 years old. Joe's father, Julius, was an elevator operator at Mount Sinai Hospital. Ida Shuster was just your typical housewife. Not that women didn't work, but I guess she didn't work. And of course, they had 3 children, Frank, Jean, and the youngest, of course, being Joe. And Joe drew on everything. Joe loved to draw. He loved to draw. If you love to draw, who loves to draw? Raise your hand. You love to draw? I see your hand up there. Get that hand up there. Raise your hand up there. There you go. Yeah, it's you, miss. Come on, let's go. All right. If you love to draw, keep drawing, because Joe Shuster loved to draw. But drawing paper was very expensive. So he would draw on the back of wallpaper. One story goes he would draw on the back of meat paper. I'm not sure how accurate that story is, but he would draw on anything he could find. And he loved to do this. And as much as one loved to draw and one loved to write stories, it's amazing that they met. I always felt they would meet either way, somehow, somewhere, some way. But when Joe left Alexander Hamilton High School and he was going to Glenville, like I said, Jerry's cousin, Jerry Fine, said, hey, there's this guy there. You got to meet him. You got to meet him. Good guy. Meet this guy. And he didn't say it like that, but you work with me here. And so he sat there, and they sat and they talked, and they immediately, just, like that, it was just amazing. And immediately they became friends, because they both enjoyed the same things. They both enjoyed telling stories and that kind of stuff, and creating things. They both were part of the high school newspaper, Glenville High School, and Glenville Torch. And they just basically made it work. And then when they did this mail order periodical called Science Fiction, they did about 4 issues. The 3rd issue is what we're going to talk about now. They had a character called Reign of the Superman. Now, Superman was already out there. That word was already out there. Friedrich Nietzsche had used the word. FDR was using the word. People were using the word Superman. It meant something. It also was in the advertising of. Hey, Mark, what was in the advertising of who said that?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, all right. That's a lot of help from Mark, folks. Okay, that's a lot of help. Thanks a lot, Mark. Actually, it was, believe it or not, do you know?
No, I was just going to say it's fine. It's a small detail. But
I'll tell you later. Trust me. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. And so, no. But do you know what character was called Superman? But his name was Superman? Yes.
Tarzan?
Close.
George the Jungle?
No? Yes, sir.
Doc Savage?
Doc Savage. Very good. Very good. And Jerry and Joe saw this name, Superman, and figured, okay, well, it's a catchy name. We'll just use it. We'll put it in there. And Jerry wrote this story where he used a pseudonym, Herbert S. Fine. Now, Fine, actually, that's a pseudonym. Herbert was actually an uncle of Jerry's, and Fine came from the Fine family, which was Jerry's mother's maiden name. And just to let you know as I go on with this, there was a lot more of Superman in Cleveland than people realize. Superman is a Cleveland story. The Terminal Tower is the model for the Daily Planet. Cleveland is actually Metropolis, hard to believe. The Hope Memorial Bridge is the big bridge you see in the Superman comics. Severance Hall has a place. It's all there. And it's really part of us. It's ours. And it's something that we should celebrate and embrace and enjoy. Going back to the tale, I'm telling here, when Jerry was writing this story, it's interesting because Superman is bald. There's a robot named Jor-El. Nothing wrong with being bald. Bald is beautiful. Thank you. And he's a villain. And the scientist takes this homeless derelict and transforms him because he's telepathic. He can read minds. He can do things. He became all-conquering. And that was just, like I said, just a story they wrote. Then came issue number 4. And because they couldn't afford to do it anymore, they stopped doing it.
Like what you see here? Be sure to check us out every Friday at 3:30 at Cleveland State University's main classroom building, 1899 Euclid Avenue in room 134. And if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel.